If it seemed like war yesterday, the reinforcements showed up tonight. At the center of it all, of course, is the bombed-out shell of the federal office building.
We are just 10 days away from the Oklahoma City bombing anniversary. 168 innocent people lost their lives nearly 16 years ago. Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols were convicted, but there has always been a question about a possible third suspect.
Do you think the FBI covered up the real story of the Oklahoma City bomb?
Yes.
A man looking like this. Rick says the sketch stemmed from this body shop in Kansas, where Timothy McVeigh rented the now infamous Ryder truck. Rick says at the time, the people working in the shop thought there was someone else with Timothy McVeigh.
But if I'm to believe the narrative being put forth, they're saying that the other person didn't exist. So 24 people made up an individual out of thin air. Am I to understand that that's the FBI story now?
100%. In this case, it's not one suspicious jail cell suicide by hanging, or even two, but this case has three.
All right, we are live, and this is the first time I've been live on this channel since March of last year, shockingly. I looked it up earlier, and I was like, oh my God. But I wanted to bring Margaret back. I am deep into this investigation of Oklahoma City bombing, and it is Margaret's fault with this dang book that she wrote. Has sucked me in completely, and now I'm talking to all these different people and all kinds of things are happening, but I'm still learning. I'm still new to it, and in order to get direction, I thought, hey, let me put it out to the audience, because I get comments that are like, well, what about blah blah blah, what about blah blah blah, and they're very well thought out comments and everything else. So I'm like, why not take a break, do a Q&A with Margaret, who put this book together, has so much information, and that can help propel upcoming directions. Right now, I can say that I just finished an interview with Jesse Trentadue again today, a second interview. So we're continuing down the path there. We talked a bit more about FOIA and his fight and chicanery going on in the government. I'm bringing in Ken Silva, who is an expert on PatCon. He is one of the only journalists who actually wrote about PatCon, Patriot Conspiracy. And then Kathy Sanders will be joining it. All of this is coming up. So I do hope you consider, hit that subscribe button, put the notification bell up, and more to come. So Margaret, how are you doing?
Great to be with you, Eric. I've enjoyed your emails here. I think we're getting close to the point where I should interview you. You're so deep into this, and it's great to hear. And when you said a couple of days ago, Margaret, you've created a monster, I know exactly what you mean, because it's an unending story, isn't it?
It truly is. I did not expect that. I was like, okay, this is a one-off interview. I mean, my audience is kind of thing that, they're into. I don't know that much about it. Oh, I'll check it out. And it just is one hit after another that is astounding. I also, on another show, do a lot with JFK. And, I'll get in trouble with some of my audience, but I think this is more important than JFK. In my opinion, maybe because of it's a recency bias, maybe because it's of my age. I'm only a couple of years off from Tim McVeigh. I used to live in Manhattan, Kansas at the same time he was in Junction City, and I didn't know that. So there, I'm born and raised in Tucson, Arizona. There's Kingman, Arizona ties, not the same part of the state, but still, it's kind of like, I know some of these people in this kind of vibe in a way, and it just slipped completely past me. Now, one thing I want to put out to all of you who are watching in the chat to help me is, when you ask questions, please denote it as such, question or Q or something and kind of make them short. It's very difficult for me to read a full paragraph question Margaret, and I do like to read them out loud because some people will listen to this. Like I listen to YouTube videos more often than I actually watch them. So,
you know, one more word as your audience is writing their questions, just to say, for me as an author, what an incredible privilege to tune into the reaction of the real audience, the people I wrote this book for. So thank you for hosting this, Eric.
no, thank you. I mean, this is a wonderful time here, and actually, I will start off with a first question of my own, to front load it, and maybe I'll come up with a couple on the way because I'm so into it. I was thinking about the 24 eyewitnesses. And that was something that just bugged me, and that set me off in this whole deal. Has anybody gone back around, a private detective or anybody, with the pictures of the ARA people in photo lineups, like mixed up, to these witnesses and say, hey, they talked to you for a sketch. Was it one of these people? Has anyone ever gone back to all the witnesses just with the photo lineup?
I don't know. Now let's remember the photo, not to get in the weeds here, but the photo lineup, the poster, the wanted poster, from the rental truck agency in Kansas.
Yep.
And then the 24 eyewitnesses are on the ground, just the ordinary bystander witnesses on the ground in Oklahoma City on the morning of the bombing. So those are two different sources. And whether the reporter, and I know you're going to interview Kathy Sanders, the reporter who, J.D. Cash, the Oklahoma reporter, who broke a big story in early 1996, interviewing 9 of those 24 eyewitnesses himself, who saw John Doe 2 with Timothy McVeigh. J.D. Cash did some of that work afterwards, Eric, showing pictures to people. The short answer is I don't know if he ever showed pictures of his suspects or persons of interest in the ARA, because remember, that was evolving over months and years to follow. So I don't know if he did that work.
And by the way, it's J.D. Cash on the left, and that's Roger Charles on the right. They kind of work together quite a bit of the time as well. J.D. Cash is really early on, among the first, I'd say. Is that fair? That he was one of the first main players?
He was a towering giant of a journalist on this story. He scooped the entire elite news media on this story because he wasn't taking the spoon-fed narrative from the Department of Justice in Washington. He was on the ground interviewing those witnesses. And as you point out, Roger Charles and J.D. Cash, they did hook up as a journalistic juggernaut after Roger came to town in 1997 as part of the ABC News crew. So when they got to know each other, and when J.D. Cash handed ABC the Carol Howe story, now she's the informant who was embedded in the bombing plot in Elohim City, J.D. Cash knew he could not give that story the ride that ABC could, so he handed the story to Roger Charles and the other producer on the story.
Yeah, now Carol Howe is somebody I haven't gotten deep into with the interviews yet. She's coming up because a lot of people are very curious about Carol Howe. She's a very interesting story, and it's kind of a little all over the place as you follow it. But I will also say that one of her documentarians, because I don't know if he ever talked to her directly, John Ronson's a little bit all over the place in this. Like, he was
Agreed.
around kicking in 98 and things like that, and then he's sort of popping back up in 20 something. He's an interesting individual, and I'm always fascinated about people who come up in odd locations and stuff like that. He spent a lot of time, he's hanging out with Alex Jones, going to Bohemian Grove. One would almost
I
think
didn't
he
know
might be
that.
cooperating with some people, or maybe getting an assist for some people. I don't know. It's just, he's very talented, very enjoyable to watch, but just interesting character.
Yes, he has some skeptics among the experts or the orbit that I'm familiar with, the research community on the bombing. And when John Ronson updated he did a podcast. I guess it's a podcast called The Debutante, and that was the Carol Howe story. But as some of your audience, because I can tell your audience is deep into this story, as some of them know, Carol Howe died mysteriously last January. It was after my book, Blowback, went to press already. And she died in a house fire, and she had been living as a recluse very mysteriously for years and years. Ronson came back. He's a Brit. He came back to America and covered that the mysterious death of Carol Howe. But somehow, when John Ronson tells the story, you always feel like, well, now I have to listen to his next installment because I really didn't find out what happened here.
No, again, he's a very talented presenter.
Yes.
I've read multiple books that he's done, but I think he actually lives in New York now, or did for a bit.
Does he?
We have a mutual connection, but yeah, he did come back. Now, I don't think he ever talked to her in recent years. I know she was hiding as a recluse, or I got that impression. I have a feeling.
She was underground. You're right. When he did The Debutante, he didn't have an interview with Carol Howe.
Right. It was all stock footage. And by the way, a lot of it came from, I did not realize it until thankfully somebody obtained it for me, and there will be footage I'll share from it. The Diane Sawyer interview with Carol Howe is a major chunk of The Debutante. If you take that as like all the spicy bits that are going in there, the cool footage and whatever that you listen, I think it's 100% from that interview. And his previous piece, Secret Rulers of the World, which he did in, it came out in 2000, I believe. So interesting stuff there. We're going
that
down
interview, Eric, that Diane Sawyer interview. Oh my God. When I first, and I haven't seen it, as you know, but I do have the transcript, and I reported on it in Blowback. And to me, the question that had been hanging out there since the bombing, that's what she led with. Like, so did Timothy McVeigh do it alone? And her response was just instantaneous. Oh no, I knew this was coming. I pulled my car over. I knew that this, and she was referring to the Elohim City crew, this was the war that they said was coming. It was amazing.
Absolutely. And I've got the first question in. Here we go. Greg Gonzalez. Question: how do eyewitnesses get ignored to claim there is no second bomber?
Oh, well, Greg, great question. And I think, I hang my hat confidently on saying that this was a cover story and not the truth, largely because of these 24 eyewitnesses. And when you ask, how do they get ignored? The answer to this is the enormous power of the authority of the federal government. I mean, when officials stand in front of flags and official seals and report to the American public that this is what happened, or prosecutors tell juries, they have an enormous discretion about who the prosecutors I'm referring to now, who they include on the witness list and who they don't. So these witnesses were aggressively swept under the carpet and ignored. And the federal officials who bore responsibility for that also had the power to pull that off.
And got promoted. I was talking to Jesse earlier, and I mean, let's look at the outcome from some of these people. Eric Holder, whatever happened to that guy? Oh, he wound up becoming the attorney general under Obama. And there's this other dude, Merrick Garland. What happened with him? Wait, he almost made it to the Supreme Court. Fell back a little bit, but became an attorney general. And then it was Ronald. I don't know why the name keeps slipping my mind, but another one became a federal judge. It's like certain people that towed a line seem to get promoted. And then other people, though, because not everybody did that. Danny Coulson, who seemed to be maybe one of the most qualified people imaginable to work the case, kind of put on ice and then shuttle out to a retirement. And I believe Bob Ricks as well. Was he a special agent in charge of Oklahoma City? And he was run out on the rail himself. It's
Absolutely.
Weird. And Danny Coulson wanted to have a grand jury to investigate. Now, isn't that normal?
Yes. Years later.
Want that?
Yeah, just remarkable. And the Danny Coulson turnabout is, again, one of those pivotal moments in the investigation. And it's not something we're necessarily covering today, but when he came to the point in 2003, and I believe it was on a PBS documentary, he made that comment about the 24 eyewitnesses and just said, this is not...
There were 24 people that were interviewed by the FBI that said they saw Mr. McVeigh on April 19th with someone else, and they had no reason to make it up. They didn't have a dog in that fight. They didn't have any reason to make something up. They told the agents exactly what they saw, and the agents wrote it down. If only one person had seen it, or 2 or 3, but 24 people say, yes, I saw him with somebody else. That's pretty powerful.
I agree. It's pretty powerful.
And so this is Greg's question. How does that happen? And it became a pivotal moment when Danny Coulson asked that question on television. And it's a good question.
And he obviously had retired before that point.
Yes.
Because I'm sure that he would have, if he hadn't by then, he would have been gone the next day. Because another person we talked about, Roger Charles, he too, when he was working with ABC, spent too much time with J.D. Cash and wanted to expand the story to a full hour. I think built out an entire segment, and it got spiked. He got pissed. He went on to Don Imus, had an interview the next morning. I want to find that interview. Margaret, if you know anybody that has an interview, let me know. Audience,
I will.
If you know anybody, let me know. I'm looking all over for it. Anyway, he was shown the door at ABC right after that. And it turns out, I think you wrote in your book, why was he shown the door? What happened to ABC? Was there anything internal happening?
Well, this was a remarkable story of once J.D. Cash turned over the Carol Howe story. And I mean, remember, the context, the timing is always so important on these moments. This was February of 1997. The Timothy McVeigh trial was going to open in Denver in 2 months' time, or a little over 1 month's time. And here was a story about outing this federal informant who had been embedded in the bomb plot and had been warning her handlers that an attack was coming and that Oklahoma City was on the short list of targets. So this was a story that absolutely had the capability of demolishing the lone wolf prosecution against Timothy McVeigh. This could have destroyed the case against him. So what happened was, on the eve of broadcast, or the day of broadcast, there were rumors of trouble beforehand. But on the day of broadcast, after the producers had gone the extra mile to save their story, the Justice Department weighed in with ABC News, and ABC killed its own story, in which it had invested a great deal. And they had jumped through all the hoops that you have to go through at the network level to get the story cleared through the Department of Justice media rep, and check all those boxes. And they had their story, and their story was correct. But again, back to the question, how does this happen? It was an enormous power play by the Department of Justice against the network. They didn't want to kill their own story, but they did.
Well, there's a little bit more to it. I think you wrote about in the book that Jesse had turned up, and that was a senior person at ABC who may well have been a government informant. There's some strong implications of that. And Jesse turned up evidence of manuals, literal manuals that were put out on how to infiltrate defense teams, news networks, and other things like that.
Yes, absolutely.
Affect her?
The one of the executives at ABC. Now, this Roger Charles, who tragically passed away a few years ago. I only wish Roger were here today. You definitely want to interview Roger.
Him. Yeah.
But Roger always suspected this executive who had been intimately involved with the Carol Howe story and trying to save it, suspected that he had been the one who killed the story, but it was never admitted. And you're right, years later, and it was again Roger who uncovered this secret FBI memo about the informant. And that led to a big public controversy in the press because, and this executive denied that he was an informant, defended the journalistic habit or custom of trading info with the FBI, especially if you're, like an executive at a news network, you're getting a lot of information that's worth trading for. But he denied that he had, passed any information about this story. He admitted that he had passed information about another blockbuster Oklahoma City story that had to do with the alleged Saudi involvement in the story from a couple of years earlier. Okay. But you're right, Jesse Trinidou, everyone, I'm sort of assuming most of our audience knows.
No, you're right. No,
Jesse
please
is.
always do that because I'm so deep that I'm just like talking.
Like double clicking on Jesse Trinidou. He is the force behind this entire investigation I chronicle in Blowback. Jesse Trinidou is a lawyer in Salt Lake City who never intended to investigate or solve the Oklahoma City bombing. He just wanted to find out and find justice for his murdered brother, who Jesse believes, his name is Kenneth Trinidou, was murdered by the FBI in an enhanced interrogation connected to the Oklahoma City bombing. We won't carry that too much further. But Jesse, by the time this controversy about the ABC executive, by the time this comes into play, he has begun discovering and filing his weapon of choice as a lawyer has been the Freedom of Information Act, which is supposed to be the American citizens' court of last resort to see and own information that actually belongs to us already, but is being held secret by the government. So Jesse got into this issue of informants, and as he will tell the story, he made inquiries about this sensitive informant program, and he wasn't expecting to get back a lot, thinking that the government would just say, well, we don't do this. We don't spy on, television networks, Congress, churches. But actually, it turns out that, yes, the government was in the spying business and even had manuals that, tell them, I guess, who they can and can't spy on. So that was a shocker. And that evolved right out of that situation in which ABC killed the Carol Howe story back in 1997.
Right now, for those who want to know more, who is this guy, Jesse Trentadue? By coincidence, my show that came out last Thursday was with Jesse Trentadue, and I believe next Thursday's episode will also be Jesse Trentadue.
And Jesse, that interview, which I watched, spellbound, it's a rare interview. Okay. Jesse says, we hope, of course, this doesn't come to pass, but he said to Eric as they began, this may be the last time I tell this story at full length. And it is the full story of the tragic and horrific murder of Kenneth Trentadue, which was covered up and presented to the public. Again, that early question, how does this happen? How does it happen that Kenneth Trentadue, a prisoner in a suicide-proof cell in solitary confinement, winds up a bloodied corpse with his throat slashed, his stun gun injuries on his feet, bruises, lacerations everywhere. And the prison comes out within days to tell the American public that, oh, well, this prisoner hung himself. Suicide by hanging. How does that happen?
It actually happened within hours. And by the way, just a quick note on YouTube, we can't say that word. So that's why I always say weird things like self-deletion and stuff like that, because YouTube censors you for that word.
I'm not sure I know what word that is, but I'll try to avoid it.
The act of taking oneself out, that word.
Oh, you can't. Oh, sorry. Okay, got it.
It's okay. That's YouTube. They're silly about it, and that's why you'll listen to shows sometimes. You'll be like, why are they talking in this weird way, like they're drug dealers trying to hide a transaction? It's because
code. Code. Right.
Exactly. So let me see. Okay, I've got a couple things really quickly. Susan McAllister's a new member. Thank you very much. I do appreciate it. It's great to see. Christopher Ebden, a new member as well. Thank you. Peter Crocito is a new member. Okay. Thank you. All these, thank you guys so much. It really does help a lot here. Now, Stephen Healy, Eric, read Wendy Painting's Aberration in the Heartland of the Real. I want to reach out to Wendy Painting, and I plan to reach out to Wendy Painting. I will tell you that her book is 1,200 pages and a little intimidating to immediately dig into right now, but there's some crossover because I've covered Jolly West and things of that sort. So I'm very interested in it, but the same way as when I interviewed Margaret and when I interviewed Jesse, is I want to take some time to really bring something to the table and research her work, what she says, what she feels, and 1,200 is a lot to get through on a short notice. So definitely we'll be doing that. Another individual is I know a lot of you are saying, hey, what about Terrence Yake or Yake? I have reached out to his widow. We are trying to schedule something in the future. There's some scheduling conflicts, but I will be interviewing her hopefully by the end of the year, maybe, but it is in the works. So I just wanted to let you know that, no, I haven't forgotten that. Now, quick question on that. You had mentioned, I would say your book, Blowback, is literally kind of the Jesse Trentadue investigation path. And then Kathy Sanders was her own investigation path. And you guys were sort of running, or Jesse and her were running parallel. They knew about each other and they worked, together, and there's overlap, but they're two different tracks. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Kathy Sanders she was a survivor and a victim who lost her precious toddler grandbabies in that explosion. So, her perspective from ground zero and immediately was unique and as you say, not on a separate path, somewhat parallel to Jesse's. And of course, she became closely associated with J.D. Cash, who stayed at her home while he was doing his reporting. So she was very much a part of that path. She knew J.D. Cash before Jesse did.
No, as a matter of fact, Jesse just told me earlier today he has just learned that when J.D. Cash called him about his brother, saying, describe your brother, that Kathy was in the background listening. It was on speakerphone. So she was in the room. It all does, combine.
She was in the room a lot of the time on some of these excursions that JD was doing. And I imagine, Kathy's very humble, but I just imagine, knowing her a little bit as I do, she was an amazing door opener, because she just would go to people and say, I lost my grandchildren. I need you to help me find the truth, and that is a very compelling appeal.
Sure.
To your audience that wants more about Terrence Yake, and we talked a little bit about this before, Eric, but I just would say, without a doubt, the Terrence Yake story hits a nerve with America, and you just have to know the log line that this was a hero cop. This police officer carried multiple victims out of the Murrah building on his back on April 19, 1995. And then a year later, he suddenly, just in advance of receiving the Medal of Honor from his police department, he suddenly winds up dead and tortured. There's an amazing link, which we still don't know the full truth of it, but the state of Terrence Yake's body is like the state of Kenneth Trinadue's body.
And the same
beaten
answer as
savagely.
Before. Yep. And they gave the same line that he did it himself.
Yep.
Which is pretty astounding. It truly is. But yes, I definitely, and I wanted to address it because I get that comment a lot, on X, on here, in the comments, and I absolutely do want to talk to his widow and anybody else, because I want to never forget the human elements here. This is why Jesse's so important. He lost his brother. This is a person who has lost his family member. Kathy lost her grandchildren. Her daughter lost her children. I never want to get so excited about the big picture things of the government and the chicanery and forget the actual people who are victims in the story. I think it's very important to
good, because they're what matters most. Absolutely.
Let me see. Kyriakos. Is this Kyriakos? I think that's how you say it. I think it's Kyriakos. What about the part of the story that McVeigh was chipped in the butt by the Army and was nearly confirmed by shortwave radio host William Cooper. I think that's taken the Jolly West story maybe a little far. I don't know.
You know, I don't know. I have read Wendy Painting's excellent 1,200-page book, The Aberration of the Heartland of the Real. And Wendy, and it is a tour de force, and the research she goes into about Timothy McVeigh and his military record, I'm about to connect a dot here, has to do, it covers, I'm almost sure, but I can't quite sum it up, what Wendy Painting says about Timothy McVeigh's fear that he had a chip implanted in his butt. But I think it's not something that we want to dismiss. That technology did exist, you know, in the military world. There are generally a few half-lives ahead of everyone else. And it's the mists of time, and it's definitely Wendy's story, I think. But I believe she covers it, and I wouldn't dismiss the possibility. I think McVeigh.
Well, he at least felt it, and that's
he was
fine.
concerned.
If he thought it. So I'm not trying to discount it. I don't want to go there yet. And again, I haven't read her book, so.
And maybe I'm influenced, and it's something you might ask Ken Silva about too, because what we found in my investigation again and again were these threads and tentacles of surveillance operations. And obviously a chip implanted would be a form of, of surveillance. So it's something I wouldn't rule it out, but I certainly can't say that it was real.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that. Another story I was really researching hard right before you came along and hijacked my life. No, was Robert Hansen.
I know the feeling.
And I don't know if you're familiar with Robert Hansen. There's actually two of them. There's Robert Hansen, the serial killer in Alaska, but even more importantly, Robert Hansen, the FBI spy. One of the secrets he gave away was a early, essentially GPS tracking system for cars. It was way ahead of time. So, some of the technology it is ahead, but I don't know. We'll have to see. And I'm thinking that, my time in the military, I did have to go through a bunch of shots. Everybody did a bunch of shots, and a lot of them were in the rear. And you could put it in your head that maybe they were adding something else there. I don't know.
One more button on this, which perplexes me, and Wendy would know the most, is that the military records of Timothy McVeigh and his convicted co-conspirator, Terry Nichols, have all been sealed. So it's hard to find out. And of course, very interesting to wonder what's in those records.
Another FOIA time. Why are they sealed? He's dead. He's executed.
Yeah.
What are you going to find out? Oh, yeah. Good question. Lisa Dede. Question: did the Trentadue family know why Kent went from SoCal to Oklahoma City?
No. And that is one of the pivotal moments in the murder mystery of Kenneth Trentadue. He was arrested coming across the border from Mexico after visiting his wife's family in mid-June, kept in custody on the old parole violation, for which he was just facing like the judicial equivalent of a slap on the wrist. And then suddenly, in mid-August, he was moved to Oklahoma City, of all places, to have his parole hearing, even though the judge, his parole officer, his crimes, and I think a co-defendant were all located in Southern California. So the short answer is no, they don't know why, and they're very suspicious, were very suspicious about why he was moved and killed.
Yes, and that is, and I definitely recommend checking out the interview with Jesse, because one of the questions I asked Jesse was, what was his parole violation? So definitely, definitely check that out. And it is very, very interesting. Now, next question here is from K1 Fate, who we lovingly know as Otto. He's one of these people who has different screen names and everywhere, and he is he's sort of a cross between a fan and a troll. I never know with Otto because he gives me a harder time than just about anyone. But we'll go into parts with this. First part: how was Strassmeyer allowed back to Germany? And this is the illustrious Andreas Strassmeyer. This figure comes up a lot. Very, very interesting fellow. Here's a more modern picture of him. Tell us about Andreas.
Yes, and to the question, why was he allowed back in Germany? We can bring Carol Howe, who we've been talking about, into this picture because, of course, she was the informant. She was the federal government's informant inside Elohim City, which was a reclusive Christian identity. Anti-government was the vibe of Elohim City. This compound in rural eastern Oklahoma. Andreas Strassmeyer was the militia trainer, the paramilitary trainer in Elohim City. But before that, he had an elite political pedigree from Germany and had been in the German military, had intelligence training, and had come over to America, representing himself as a Civil War reenactment buff. I mean, it sort of smacked of this is my cover story. and he had some fancy friends, one of them a Colonel Petruski, who was in the Air Force, and Strassmeyer would later say he was one of Strassmeyer's father's friends and had CIA connections, which of course the colonel denied. But anyway, and Strassmeyer was hoping that the colonel was going to hook him up with a job in the DEA, and that never happened. And he kicked around the country and eventually found his way to Elohim City. He becomes so important in the bombing case because Carol Howe, when she was warning her handlers that this attack was coming, identified Andreas Strassmeyer as a key figure in the bomb plot. She told her handlers that he was inciting, as of late in November, late 1994, he was inciting the others at Elohim City to stop talking and start blowing up federal buildings. And that she had gone, this is all being reported by her to her handlers, that she had gone on several scouting missions to Oklahoma City, apparently casing, the target for this bombing that was coming. So the question coming from our audience, how is it that he was allowed to leave the country, is a very good one, because based on
assisted.
Based on the government's own informant, here you have a prime suspect based on his actions. We're not saying he's guilty, but you would imagine in the biggest, manhunt in the FBI's history that they would at least investigate and interview Andreas Strassmeyer. But instead, the FBI never did on American soil in person interview Strassmeyer. And I have to say, every author has sort of favorite moments in their book. One of mine is the memo, the confidential memo I published, which Jesse Trinidou, again, unearthed in his FOIA war with the FBI. But here you have the director of the FBI reporting in January of 1996, reporting on the whereabouts of Andreas Strassmeyer. The FBI knew he was in North Carolina. And the FBI director has the entire resources of the FBI at his disposal and knew that this is in the memo, knew Andreas Strassmeyer was planning to leave the country. But the FBI director doesn't detain him, doesn't interview him, doesn't go find him. And sure enough, in January of 1996, just as the FBI director knew, Andreas Strassmeyer, and he had to slip over the border because he was on an expired visa. He basically fled the country and went home to Germany.
Yeah, and there are questions whether, well, let's just say that one of Jesse's FOIA legal battles ties Strassmeyer to the CIA. So hopefully more will come out of that case. Ultimately, Jesse's under a gag order, and then there's special prosecutor. Anyway, there's so much going on with it. It's crazy. So the second part of this, we're leading into big things here. This is a cute little couple here. This is Michael and Lori Fortier. And they're having fun. He's going to be testifying ultimately against Timothy McVeigh. But they're not a nice, cute little couple walking around. I think that's Kingman, Arizona. I have a funny feeling that that's where that is. But I'm sharing that because it's very, very difficult to actually find any pictures at all of Lori Fortier or Fortier. I don't know how they say their name, but this is one of those big questions about the case. And I know you wrote about it a lot, Margaret. I'm just going to project upon you that you seem to be very troubled by the fact of the legal situation, which is essentially she got the ultimate sweetheart deal, nothing over nothing, just testify and be free. And then he almost was about the same amount of guilt as Terry Nichols, did 10 years and was out. Terry Nichols is in FDX right now. So tell us about what happened with Michael and Lori.
Well, it's incredible. And on these two, and by the way, this the court illustration you're showing, this is Lori Fortier with the makeover for trial, where she went, very much to looking very tailored and very much like, a professional woman. Their lifestyle back in Kingman had been anything but. And so they are a troubling aspect, of the case, because again, back to the spring of 1997, the case against McVeigh hinged almost entirely on, they say in a federal prosecution, you need a storyteller. And Michael Fortier became the government's storyteller of Timothy McVeigh's lone wolf plot against the Murrah building, the why of it, which was revenge over Waco, his hatred, fueling him to this radical path by himself. So without Michael Fortier and Lori Fortier, the government would have had a great challenge to tell the story of Timothy McVeigh, the lone wolf bomber.
Oh, especially because they couldn't seem to call any witnesses who saw him with another person.
Didn't dare do that because then he wouldn't be a lone wolf.
Right. So that'd be tricky.
That was quite a dance. And Michael Fortier became the path for making that case. I do make the point, and I'm glad I seem to have made the point with you, Eric, in the book, because I take some care to point out in Blowback how many witnesses place Michael Fortier in the picture and he was portrayed practically as an innocent bystander by the federal prosecutors. They needed his testimony, and in exchange, they airbrushed a lot of evidence that he was closer. I mean, testimony that would have put him inside Elohim City, some testimony that would have put him at the, in the company of McVeigh at the Lady Godiva bar 11 days before the bombing, and testimony by a then high school girl in Kansas who remembered Michael Fortier as part of Timothy McVeigh's circle at pasture parties, so-called, in the summer of 1992. So, it was a different story, and it's hard to not wonder how much of the truth, the real story of the bombing, disappeared because the government so desperately needed Michael Fortier to tell the story of Timothy McVeigh, lone wolf.
This is cheating, and there's not a question, but you gave me an excuse to pull up one of the clips that I have that I think is really very important, and that is a Lady Godiva strip club. And we didn't talk about it during our interview, so we can just very briefly fill this in, because I think this is a very important part of the story, especially for McVeigh. Oh, let's see here.
He goes, I'm a very smart man. I said, you are? And he goes, yeah. He's like, oh, really? And he goes, yes. And you're going to remember me on April of 1995. You're going to remember me for the rest of your life. Okay.
All right. So this is this weird, brief little exchange there. That is on a really creepy thing, actually, because the owner of a strip club put cameras in the dressing room. So we won't ignore that, okay? I'm acknowledging that is not considered a great behavior in general, especially considering the state of undress, I guess, if you will. But what's the significance of what that exchange was right there?
Yeah, it's again, it's an incredible moment, another really pivotal moment in the case against McVeigh, or really in the government's case against McVeigh, because according to the government's timeline, Timothy McVeigh was still in Arizona. He was in Kingman, Arizona until almost Easter Sunday, when he appeared in Junction City, Kansas. and in the Ryder truck and checked into the Dreamland Motel. But here on April 8, you have this nightclub. This is Tulsa, Oklahoma, where the strippers, and it's an amazing story. This doesn't come out for a couple of years. It's a J.D. Cash exclusive. He is on a different trail and learns of the existence of this videotape that you just played a clip from. And he chases it down. And the significance is this is April 8, 11 days before the blast in Oklahoma City. And here you have Timothy McVeigh, supposedly the lone wolf, in the company of two other men, one of them, and there are different reports because a Canadian television crew gets into it, and later I think the British journalist Ambrose Evans Pritchard gets into it, and maybe John Ronson also still later gets into it.
He does, because he talks to the stripper in question later, who then doesn't want to talk anymore or whatever, completely flipped. And then he got the FBI records again. John Ronson's an amazing journalist. I'm just going, how are you getting all the FBI records to compare here? Boy, you just have some great access. Good work there.
Great sources, yes.
Amazing.
Well, and so there is quite a cacophony of identifications that happen. We won't, go into the whole list of them, but there are FBI 302s when J.D. Cash hits town in September of, I guess, 96. One of the really eerie things that happens is that one of the key dancers in this clip that you just played turns up dead. Blowback begins with a chapter called Trail of Death. And she was, supposedly found dead in her apartment of an overdose. This happened. Cash wanted to interview her because she was the dancer who was going to party with these guys. And Timothy McVeigh had been in the other room, reported by one of the dancers we saw in the clip, as telling one of the dancers, you're going to remember me forever on April 19, 1995.
Which is just creepy to her. Like, this is weird.
Just, and they identified him afterwards. So here, the big significance is that what is Timothy, and the bouncer at the club said that this group, the Timothy McVeigh group, was traveling with at least one and possibly two Ryder trucks that night. So what you have here is a flagrant contradiction in the official timeline. No explanation for what Timothy McVeigh was doing. And by some accounts, one of his companions that night was Andreas Strassmeyer. Now,
I was waiting for you to drop that name. Come on. We got Michael Fortier and Strassmeyer with McVeigh in one evening at a
11 days
gentleman's
before
club.
the bombing. This really puts a chink in the story of the lone wolf bomber. And it's also interesting that if you read, and this is one of the most entertaining FBI 301s that I have ever read, because, for several reasons, but one, Strassmeyer is completely missing from the picture as the FBI reports it. One of the reason the bouncer, here's why it's entertaining. The reason the bouncer reports that he recalls the Ryder trucks is that apparently one of the there was a cat fight at the bar
Yes.
between
I have
strippers
that
that
footage
night.
too, but I'm not going to play that. It's a little
And
more
one of
risque.
them ran out of the bar and into the parking lot. And I'm not sure if we're allowed to say this on YouTube, but urinated on one of the
Sure.
Ryder trucks. And, you know, this is like, this is not, it's hard to unsee this if you're the bouncer. So he was very confident that Timothy McVeigh was traveling 11 days before the bombing in Tulsa, Oklahoma, striking distance to Oklahoma City, with one or possibly two Ryder trucks and these associates of his. So
Or at least there were two Ryder trucks in the parking lot at the same time he was there. I don't know if they put him in the truck. I mean, just to be fair,
they did not. You're right.
But you know, again, that's one thing I want to do, and I really appreciate that you've done. Is I want to be so factually specific to stop, you know, the haters saying, "Wait, they never said it was in the truck." So I will always want to acknowledge that.
Thank you for that. You're right.
Different parallels there. All right, Cruzy or Cruxy with $10. Thank you very much. I appreciate this. Can we get Richard Booth on the show? I believe he was a consultant for Blowback. I'm not familiar with him, but I will look into it. I'm talking to different people.
Richard was the informational archive for Blowback, and you know, as I acknowledge in the book, I mean, he was just invaluable, and he knows a ton about the Oklahoma City bombing.
Okay. Well, awesome. I'm literally trying to put together different things right now, so I will keep that in mind. Grandpa, loyal fan, thank you, Grandpa. Always so supportive. Leo with $20, throwing down. Love this content and that you're getting the band back together, Eric. Have you considered Fred Whitehurst as an interview to pursue? He's a great talker and was on the inside of FBI for PetCon. Also, Noble Lie doc is great. I've seen Noble Lie, I have it, and I've watched parts of it again. I probably watched these docs multiple times, not only because I like the information, but I'm collecting footage to try to, you know, utilize. So that is a tremendous documentary, very thought-provoking. I don't know who Fred Whitehurst is, though. Margaret, are you familiar with him?
Oh, Fred Whitehurst, towering eminence. And in fact, thanks to Jesse and Roger Charles, I was able to talk with Fred Whitehurst as I got going about where you are now on this case. And Fred Whitehurst, so memorably, okay, he is known as a major FBI whistleblower. He is the one who blew the whistle on the FBI crime lab. I'm sure you remember that moment from the McVeigh trial. It didn't turn the tables on the government, but the FBI, but the Oklahoma City bombing was one of the tainted laboratory investigations and came under, you know, a lot of heavy fire for the techniques that were used and for the reverse engineering. And when I called Fred, Jesse knows him well. And when I called Fred Whitehurst to ask him, and we haven't talked yet about the surveillance videotapes, but as we were preparing for Jesse to file that still pending FOIA case for the surveillance videotapes of the bombing that the FBI has never allowed the American public to see, because we had covered a lot of paths. We didn't have a lot more paths to pursue. And I was lobbying for the videotapes. I mean, as a target for a FOIA. I'm a television producer. I wanted to see the video, but I also wanted a professional opinion about do we have any shot at finding them? Or are they just going to be destroyed? And so Jesse said, or Roger said, call Fred Whitehurst. And I called him, had a wonderful talk with him. And I said, what do you think, Fred? And without hesitating, he said, oh, don't worry. Those tapes are out there. They're in somebody's garage. They're in somebody's attic. They're a trophy, or somebody needs them to use. I think he meant against someone someday. Sure. So, but he was just like, don't worry about that. The videotapes are out there somewhere.
Okay. Well, I will, I'm definitely obviously interested in talking to him. That would be amazing. Let me see. What do we have here? Next up. Okay, that was Leo. Thank you, Leo, by the way, again. Daniel Ferraro, question. Do you believe that Timothy McVeigh, or McVeigh, I think, it was actually executed? I think so. I think they actually very grossly had a picture of him on the slab after the fact.
You know what? I'm not going to, I can't say what I know here, because my tongue is tied, because as I was mentioning to you, Eric, I'm going to have to tease this one, okay? Because as I was mentioning to you before we went on, one of the incredible things that has happened since the publication of Blowback has been the leads and the new sources that have come forward. I was not anticipating this. I mean, after all, I have been working on this story for like 20 years now. I mean, it's not all I did, but
no, but yeah, it's a life's work.
But yet, when the book came out, and I went on a couple of wide distribution, made appearances on podcasts, my phone started ringing. And I would say I've received perhaps 10 what I would call hot leads.
Really?
From very credible sources. And I'm just going to say that the one that has absolutely mesmerized me concerns the question, was Timothy McVeigh actually executed?
Oh, no, that's cold.
And
okay.
So, but right now I can't tell the story, because I can't tell it without giving up my source, and I can't do that. So I just have to say, let's go with context here. And maybe not everybody in the audience, this is one of those fringe areas where if this is the first thing you tell someone, they just think you are a complete lunatic, right? But there is a school of thought about Timothy McVeigh. And let's not forget, he told 2 criminals himself that he had operated in the bombing not as a terrorist, but as an undercover government operative. He let that slip to Timothy McVeigh, and that came out in my exclusive prison interview.
Right.
I'm sorry, Terry Nichols.
Oh, Terry Nichols. Okay.
I beg your pardon. He let that slip to Terry Nichols, and that came out in my prison interview. And he also told a similar story to the prison author David Hammer on death row. So there is a thought out there, it's certainly not the prevalent thought, that if Timothy McVeigh was an informant, then perhaps, and remember, Hammer went through hoops for Timothy McVeigh to help him prevent an autopsy. There was no autopsy of Timothy McVeigh after his execution. And there was a rather elaborate decoy operation at the prison in which what appeared to be the vehicle that went to the funeral home where he was supposed to be cremated actually was empty, and a different prison van took the actual body. So there was controversy, there was a decoy, there was thinking that, well, if Timothy McVeigh wasn't the criminal, then maybe he wasn't executed at all, and maybe he was whisked alive out of the prison. Now that is definitely fringe area, and I don't have proof that anything like that happened, but I will say that one of the leads that has come to my attention after the publication of Blowback, by a credible source, kind of lends credence to not necessarily that whole narrative, but to the question of what really happened on execution day.
That's kind of similar. A gentleman that I interviewed who a few years back was John McAfee, and some of my footage was actually used in his Netflix documentary. But there are questions that have come about of whether he could still be alive, and the main reason is they've not released his body. Spain has not released his body to his widow. It's like we're 4 years in now, and they've never released the body. So it's like, do you not release the body because you don't have the body to have, or what? And definitely the whole thing of he had the tattoo I didn't do myself, and all of that, and also the Epstein hangover. So there are some weird, speculation things out there. Obviously, for sake of my sanity, I'm going to come in very skeptically to start, because just to where I am. To me, my first impulse will always say no.
That's wise.
And then if it can be overcome, that's cool. But when it gets that wild, I'm going to lean on no to start with.
And I will say, I think we could bring the hammer down, and if some of your audience, if they're running with that possibility, they will know that one of the intriguing things that has happened is there have been some pictures that circulated saying, oh, this was Timothy McVeigh seen at a military base a couple of years after after his capture. Or there's another thread of, this is a picture of Timothy McVeigh, and actually an identification was made with I think with an FBI agent, but that was just completely, the hammer came down on that when I think that agent's bio was very well known, and he was at work for the FBI when Timothy McVeigh was in prison. So, that washed out.
Okay. Now I want to circle back to the kernel of the story that we started with in your book and our interview and my Jesse interview, but that's John Doe number 2. And there's different John Doe number 2s, right? There's the John Doe number 2 when the truck was rented, and then there's the John Doe number 2 when he's driving around. Would that be a fair statement? And
yes.
That leads to some confusion. One of these John Doe number 2s, the people suspected, was Richard Guthrie. Richard Guthrie did resemble his brother, but very interestingly, and I wanted to point this out because a lot of people would be confused. They're like, so he read an article about Richard Guthrie, but he didn't recognize he looked like his brother. Well, in the article that the LA Times wrote about Richard Guthrie, when he was found dead, they used this picture, which was a picture of Richard Guthrie from several years prior, I believe, when he was kicked out of the Navy. I think he was actually a Navy SEAL or something, which is kind of radical. But anyway, that was the picture they used. That looks that individual does not look like Kenneth Trentadue. And let me pull up Kenneth Trentadue just so people understand who we are talking about here. And this is Ken Trentadue. Doesn't look like him. Okay. However, if we change paths and we look at Richard Guthrie as he was arrested at the time, this guy does look like Ken Trentadue.
Oh, wow. Yeah, absolutely.
That mustache makes a very big difference. The basic profile, expression, both look hard, everything else. So I just want to point that out. And that's one John Doe number 2. Now, I think you feel that the other John Doe number 2 is Michael Brescia. And I have some pictures to run by you and see what you think. But this is Michael Brescia, kind of a handsome young man, actually. And does this guy here, Michael Brescia, on a profile at a gun show, resemble the profile of this individual in the Panthers cap?
Absolutely.
Now, we also have a shot straight on. And the nose does have kind of a similar pattern.
Absolutely.
Fairly full-lipped, basic shape, face of the shape. And I just wanted to put this out there to everybody and see what you think. So that's with the cap, but we also have him without the cap. I think there is a definite similarity to this individual in the picture.
I agree. And in the year 1995, while this manhunt raged for a while and then was weirdly canceled, right, by the FBI in the summer of 1995, there was a blogger named Mike Vanderboe who comes back into the picture much later when Newsweek magazine kills the story of does an executive edit on the John Matthews Patcon story. Vanderboe was in 1995 all over the Oklahoma City bombing story. I don't think we've ever talked about this, Eric, but he had a blog called The John Doe 2 Times. And it was full of attitude, his writing. And he was covering the Michael Brescia story. I don't know if he's sponsored. Michael Brescia was a Philadelphia boy. And I think they actually put up wanted posters in Philadelphia or unwanted posters. That would have been the tone that Mike Vanderboe might have used, because he kept reporting about Michael Brescia and kept noting that, the FBI seemed to be not at all interested in him. So
you'll have to turn me on to that. Send me a link and see if I can find it.
I will.
If it exists. It might be in the Internet Archive. Some of these things, and I point them out as I go, like I dig to find pictures, and some of these, they're on Alamy and different sites, but they're not licensable in this region. I have found that I sometimes have to use a VPN, and England seems to have no problem sharing pictures and showing stuff. But here, things are kind of tough to get a hold of. And it's very interesting. There's actually a documentary, and I'm hoping to speak to the filmmaker. Apparently, this BBC documentary has never been shown in the United States, and it is tremendous. I've gotten clips from that. So I actually even put it on YouTube, unlisted, just so I could very easily watch it, because I watch these over and over, and it got blocked immediately. So it's a very, very interesting how this information is not out there.
Yes. The Lori Fortier pictures, I was surprised the other day when you were asking for those, because I can see in my mind's eye pictures of her, and I just wonder if they have been scrubbed. I mean,
I
let's
think so.
remember
Yep, that's
Lori
one of the
and her
questions.
husband were both like received into witness protection
Exactly.
after his release from prison, and all of a sudden now you don't find any images really of either one. With look, those video clips of him from CNN, but almost nothing.
Yes, very, very,
Oh,
very, very little. And I
were
do
you
wonder that.
to return to the John Doe 2
Sure.
for a minute, and that's a very interesting photo gallery you just showed. Just to remind everyone about how, because I thought you were going to ask me, so what do you think? Like, which one of them was John Doe 2? But I think one more piece of the story is when Timothy McVeigh on death row
Mhm.
sent a message to Jesse and said, I'm going to tell you what happened here. The FBI killed your brother, and they mistook him for Richard Guthrie. Now, he actually told that to David Hammer on death row.
Right.
And
Right.
Hammer knew enough to understand, because he was interviewing McVeigh about what had really gone down. And we haven't gone into that, but in essence, Timothy McVeigh said the Aryan Republican Army was his support team on the ground in Oklahoma City on the day of the bombing. That Guthrie was there, that Brescia was there, that his co-leader Peter Langan was there, and a couple of the other guys were there. So McVeigh put both Brescia and Guthrie in the picture, but he told Jesse in 2003 that Guthrie, he essentially, indirectly, by saying that McVeigh mistook, by saying that the FBI mistook Kenneth Trinidad for Guthrie, McVeigh was saying Guthrie was John Doe 2. However, and I know there's always a however with McVeigh, but he told a lot of different stories. And when I went around and around as editor and writer with David Hammer in the second
Right.
edition, or in his sequel, Deadly Secrets, based on those McVeigh interviews, Hammer really kind of backpedaled and put both Brescia and Guthrie in the picture by the side of the bomb truck, where an eyewitness would have seen the both of them. So it became impossible to discern, which one of them was it, if either one.
Yeah, and in fairness, Hammer is a definitive con man.
Yes.
Just not trustworthy all around. As
Difficult
well,
to
McVeigh wasn't a
edit.
nice guy either.
Difficult to edit.
Yeah, but you were difficult for him too, according to your book.
Yeah,
He had some choice words for you.
he did.
So it was a loving relationship with
Yeah.
the hard cases,
Yeah.
which is very odd. Catherine, he was lethal injection was the method of execution for McVeigh.
Yes.
And then, we answered that where Fortier is today. We don't know. And I do really think that is part of it. I would not be surprised if the FBI, it's already been proven that YouTube, a division of Google, has admitted Google has admitted that the FBI pressured them into what was allowed and what was not allowed. The same thing with the Twitter files on X. So why wouldn't the FBI say, hey, Google, this person's in witness protection and we need these pictures removed? And especially her, because Fortier was the one who actually got convicted and there was more time, but they have really scrubbed her offline pretty big, which of course just stirs me on to go, okay, I want to find more, and I did find a little.
You did. You got a great clip there. I never saw that before.
Right, and then this that's her on the left here, I believe. And obviously there's the drawing, but I was kind of comparing the features to the one on the left, because I believe the one on the left is again in a back PBS archive files found somewhere into one of those that pulls that. And yes, I am a little bit obsessive in trying to find pictures and things like that to help share the
It shows
story.
in your work in a great way, Eric.
Well, thank you. Coming from a television producer, I do appreciate that, because I'm a little YouTuber.
Well, the other day, and I had to laugh because I know you've been down this road before, but when I threw out, and we haven't found it yet, but when I threw out, we really need to see a picture of Alden Gillis Baker, right? I mean, nobody has that picture. This is the prisoner who witnessed glimpses of Kenneth Trinidad's murder, and nobody has seen his picture yet.
Nope. And it's like there's got to be a mugshot somewhere. I mean, at a minimum, a mugshot. You know,
but for reasons of privacy, unless the prisoner is a fugitive, the BOP won't release the mugshot. I mean, you're right. There must be one. Somebody would leak it, but we haven't found that somebody yet.
Yeah, not yet. And then Peter Langan, interesting character here. This guy is now Donna Langan.
That's right. The first
trans,
the first
inmate, government funded
operation on the sex change operation on a federal prisoner was received by Peter Langan, now Donna Langan.
So yeah, another weird tie-in to this crazy story. Peter Langan himself, anyway, the individual Langan, father CIA, who was it? I think it's Gus Langan or something. Father was CIA. The individual,
high-ranking CIA officer in Saigon during the Vietnam War.
Yes, and Langan also was an informant for the Secret Service, which I think is very interesting. How you have an informant, and Langan's been locked up for life. I don't think he's ever getting out. He seems to be the one Aryan Republican Army or whatever who is gone, locked away forever, which is interesting when you have essentially a federal operation and he's taken a fall for them. What are your thoughts on that?
That's right. And it's one of the weirdest turns in a story with many weird turns, that he was set on his path to become the co-leader of the Aryan Republican Army when the Secret Service basically not broke him out of jail, but released him, plucked him from jail in Georgia, where he was awaiting trial for a robbery he committed with Richard Guthrie. And so soon after, he went rogue and hooked up with Guthrie, and they started the Aryan Republican Army. So really, the Secret Service provided one of these two leaders of this gang, and people should understand the scope of their operations. This was the biggest bank robbery spree since Jesse James. This was 22 bank robberies around the Midwest from 1994 to 96, and they took $250,000, which is twice that in today's money, and not a penny of it was ever recovered. Guthrie told the FBI after his capture that they had donated generously to white power causes.
Okay. Yeah. The funny part about this is their MO was kind of copying a movie from
Yes.
1991, Point Break,
Yes.
where they are wearing the president's masks, going. You kind of going, would that be a Fed operation at all? Maybe that you don't know how bank robbers do it, so you've got a movie template, and so you copy the movie, and voila, you literally. This is the FBI showing off the masks and everything from when they seized the operation. So
Absolutely.
I just find that to be an amusing tie. Seeing the chat. Oh, go on.
No, sorry. Well, you know where the mystery story goes is 2011 when the PatCon spy, ex-PatCon spy John Matthews, comes forward to Jesse Trinidu, and one of his bombshell revelations to Jesse, as he describes this octopus-like secret surveillance program, PatCon, targeting right-wing extremism, one of his blockbuster revelations is that the FBI created the Aryan Republican Army as a front group. And so you're exactly right. When you look at these pictures, you just see these criminals who knows what leverage was used with them to, get them to do what they did. But they seem to have had a very cynical edge to them about their mission, right? I mean, and I think I agree with you. I think we see that in these pictures, the point blank masks.
Oh yeah, I mean, point break, but yeah, I mean it's definite. I mean, it's to the point where I'm going to be cutting a clip of the film to put in when we're talking about it, because it just you can't make this stuff up. Now, it is possible that some individuals who wanted to rob banks aren't necessarily the brightest candles on the cake, and they may, be influenced by movies and say, oh, I want to be cool and adventurous. Sure, that's possible. But I find it kind of amusing. I saw the president mask. I'm like, that makes me think about Point Break. And I'll tell you, I actually kind of went into it backwards because I didn't remember when Point Break came out. And I was thinking, oh, sometimes movies will take from reality. Like, I don't know, you remember the big gunfight in Heat?
Yes.
There was the Hollywood shootout. I forgot the name of it, but it was like in Hollywood, there was literally machine guns. They were shooting out with the cops in broad daylight. And the movie was, kind of taken from real life a little bit there. So I thought it was that order. And then I saw when it came out, I was like, oh no, it's the reverse. They're taking it from the movie.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious. Now, I've seen the name floating around in the chat about Coop. Coop, I commented, whoever it is, there's a YouTuber, I think their name is Coop, C-O-O-P, and it commented on my video saying something or whatever. Anyway, and I checked it out, saw his videos, actually listened to them both, and commented on his. I haven't heard anything from the individual since, but I'm always, I'm open to hear from anybody with any kind of information. So Coop, if you're watching, or if anybody is Coop adjacent, sure, put me in touch. And Blue Unicorn, oh, don't worry about it. I'm not that way. I think there's lots of room on YouTube for all kinds of channels. I think that what I saw, Coop actually did good work, and I shared his video with Jesse because I think that it's far more important that Jesse gets a chance to see everybody who is talking about his brother and his brother's case, and Jesse tries to collect everything that is about his brother and his brother's case. So no, I think that's perfectly fine. I don't mind. We're all interested in this case, and we all can learn from that. So I don't recall the name of the documentary I was referring to. I just don't have it right on hand. I think it's like Oklahoma City BBC, but I just don't remember it directly. It is out there somewhere. I might put it up on Locals. I don't know. See, I have a thing called Locals where I can get a stand. Daniel Ferraro said, question, was McVeigh's statement at sentencing one sentence? Is that a joke? It sounds almost like a joke.
Is this where he quoted the Supreme Court justice? And I quoted in the book.
That's right.
That's all I have. I do think so. Brandeis.
That's right. That's right.
And weirdly enough, if we are talking about that statement, the government is the ultimate teacher, basically. And
didn't Hammer use that as well in his book?
Well, Jesse used it.
That's right. And
in his FOIA, and Hammer told Jesse that McVeigh basically borrowed it from Jesse, and who knows if he did or he didn't, but it was. So I think that's the statement that our viewer is referring to.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Wait. Jose Gallison. Wait a minute. No. Okay. I've somehow a lot of these names are coming in a hurricane force. I've seen No Way Jose. I think I follow him on X. Somehow I was tying him to Ken Silva, who is JD Cashless, and yes, I will confront him about his name and say, "Are you carrying on the legacy of JD Cash with your X name?" I assume he probably is, but I'll have to look into No Way Jose or
I think Jose. And this would have been a couple of years ago, but I believe that Jose has been instrumental in publicizing the Terrence Yeakey case.
Okay. Well, great. Again, I'm open to everything, and that's part of why I wanted to do a Q&A. Is literally this kind of gets people to give ideas, inspirations, and
there was one of your audience, and I, by the way, hello to all of you. Some of Eric's audience has made its way to the Blowback X account, which is great. We have quite a lively discussion going over there. So if anyone else is interested in jumping in, please do. I saw a comment, and I think it's from one of yours followers, Eric, saying, "I'm going to watch today, but I just want to put this out there. I don't think you can understand the Oklahoma City bombing unless you understand Ruby Ridge."
Yes.
And you have to go back further than Waco is the person's point. And so I just will quickly comment on that because it's so interesting. Blowback, as the investigation unfolds, encounters one after another of these characters who may or may not have been undercover informants. And to me, what is so amazing about the Randy Weaver story is that it all gets going when the ATF tries to inveigle Randy Weaver into being an undercover informant. I mean, eventually he gets arrested for the, shaving off the,
which
whatever.
is just a bullshit charge. I mean, that's that's really the crux of that. And from what I'm finding out, it actually goes before Ruby Ridge back to CSA, and they were planning to bomb the Murrah building.
Yes.
Long before that, and it goes with Richard Snell, and
yes.
So, I'm trying to find my way in, and I will be dipping backward. I plan to have Gary Nessler back. He's agreed to talk with me. Gary Nessner was the lead negotiator at Waco. He got pulled and kicked to the side, and then that's when they got violent on them. And he was on kind of the opposite end of Colson in the Waco incident, but he had a good communication going with Koresh. He had talking and everything. And he was featured in the series. He was played by a famous actor. I don't remember the guy's name, but he's been covered. But you're right, going back, and then we can go forward, because Carol Howe is somebody that I'm, interested in. I'll be covering somehow. It's one of those I'm like, God, I wish I could interview her. So some of these is how to back my way in when I can't interview directly. But while I was looking for a picture of another guy who's throughout all of this, Dennis Mahon, bomb making fool himself, in prison for making bombs, folks. So that he does this, it's his thing. I ran across this picture of him, his brother, and another woman. Her name is Rebecca Williams. Rebecca Williams is a stripper who went working for the ATF in 2009. Her parallels with Carol Howe. And remember, people don't understand this, but Dennis Mahon was being watched by Carol Howe working for the ATF. So it's ATF, Dennis Mahon, some attractive female. Interesting. So I have reached out to the person who wrote the article on her. I want to talk to her if I can. I believe she is underground. If anybody knows her or how to get a hold of her, I definitely want to talk to her as well, because sometimes answers are in the future as well as in the past. Because,
absolutely,
there's a pattern of behavior. But for today, I want to look on locals. I know somebody had a couple questions here on locals, and the locals is direct support of me, and I always appreciate it so much. So Snell It asked, question, besides the Murrah surveillance tapes, what other records have not been released? Well, Tim McVeigh's military records, you mentioned, for one.
Yes. The other biggie is, and this is huge, is the John Matthews. Let's double click. Everyone knows that John Matthews is the FBI PatCon spy who came forward to tell Jesse, basically his first words were, PatCon is bigger than you know and uglier than you can imagine. So he described to Jesse, and this is completely counter to what the FBI would say. They would say PatCon was this little operation targeting 3, extremist groups over a couple of years, nothing to see here. Matthews told a very different story of a huge octopus-like surveillance and infiltration program. And during the 3 years that Matthews and Jesse, talked about PatCon, Matthews told more and more about the inside workings of this surveillance program, this rogue surveillance program, which he said included illegal gun sales, ammunition sales. He told Jesse that PatCon was in the wings at the end of Waco, that when the Janet Reno DOJ was mulling going in there with the heavy artillery, PatCon was standing around providing money to the militias in the wings. In other words, more or less provoking them with cash.
Right. ARA was protected operation, and they had the serial numbers, and the ARA was distributing that money amongst the extremist groups, and they were following the money.
There you go.
The same way as the Operation Fast and Furious with Eric Holder, who, by the way, is involved in all this, was following the guns. Get these guns, run them through the shop, track the serial numbers, and lo and behold, federal officials get killed, and it becomes a giant problem. So yeah, PatCon's huge, and I'm actually interviewing Ken Silva to
Oh, that'll be
start digging
right
into
in his
PatCon.
wheelhouse. Yes. Well, back to your audience's question here about what else. I bring up Matthews because of the weird turn this whole case takes. Matthews, after Newsweek gutted the story, Matthews wanted to expose PatCon, and the Newsweek story, as it was actually published, utterly failed to do that. And so he was left basically with a target on his back for all of the infiltrating of these dangerous groups he had done for the FBI. And yet he didn't get what he had gone for, which was to expose PatCon. So he agreed to become Jesse's star witness in the FOIA trial to force the release of those videotapes. And on the eve of his testimony, he pulled out of the trial, telling Jesse, the FBI says not to testify, and he feared that his handlers were going to take his military benefits and his health, his disability. So he was gone. Now, that whole thing is now pending and marooned in a long court-ordered investigation. But the deposition, and Jesse and Matthews are both gagged, like court-ordered gag orders. They cannot talk about the PatCon and Matthews' PatCon revelations. However, Matthews gave a deposition in the run up to the trial or after the trial. In any case, it's a sealed deposition in which we can assume, although no one has seen it outside the principals in this lawsuit who are gagged, but we can assume that Matthews told the whole story, chapter and verse, of the rogue doings of this gigantic FBI surveillance program, which he described to Jesse, by the way, speaking of Fast and Furious and Eric Holder, as being very specifically a precursor of Fast and Furious, involving the same Arizona gun store that was central to the Fast and Furious operation. So the question does come up, whether, Eric Holder, how could he not have known about the workings of PatCon? And Eric Holder, remember, in 2012, was found in contempt of Congress because he refused to give details about Fast and Furious. So what you see here is the burial of a playbook, a rogue surveillance playbook of the FBI that goes all the way back to 1995, and
even earlier into the late 80s, because PatCon was in response to what went down with the CSA and the sedition trials that the government lost very badly.
Absolutely, that's a great
after
point.
They had the siege on the CSA on what date was it?
April 19.
So, and involving Richard Snell, who was executed on what date? April 19th, the exact same day as the Oklahoma City bombing. The day and year, that day, Oklahoma City bombing happened. He was executed later that day. What's significant about April 19th? It is called Patriots Day. The first instance of it was the Battle of Lexington and Concord. It goes all the way back and is very important to these people. And they knew how important it was to these people. And executing Richard Snell on that day, Waco being done on that day, the CSA
Was so
raid done on that
provocative.
day. Yes. I mean, a lot of this is potentially egged on, and it is really, really frightening to consider. And as far as the case goes, I actually was talking to Jesse earlier about that, and there's a question about witness intimidation with John Matthews, and that is the part of the holdup. It is being investigated for 11 years, whether there was witness intimidation to pull him off of the case, and that is what's holding up and keeping some of that sealed. I fear that they're just stalling, and because nobody can do anything about it except for Jesse. He said he can't even have his staff doing it. He can't share it with anybody, no other attorneys. It's literally only him. It's completely sealed. It's like they're waiting for him to die. I'll just be honest. It's very dark. He didn't say that, but it does feel like that. If they could just keep delaying, eventually he will either give up or he's getting up there in the years. And
I agree.
that is sad.
Eric. These, you have men in their 70s, both Jesse and John Matthews. And as the decades play out, it's hard not to see a dark, playbook of running out the clock.
And that's part of the reason why I'm hot on this, is I realize
Me
that
too.
many, Roger Charles passed away, J.D. Cash passed away. We talk about Kathy Sanders, but her husband, she's a widow. He passed away, and there are many others. So last couple questions here, and we'll wrap it up. This is from Locals, entry required. Margaret, what is the reality regarding Aryan Nation type criminal and terrorist organizations in the USA? I think they're rare, personally.
Are they, is he asking, or she, do they exist?
No, okay. He's saying there's some explanation here. Democrats / deep state and the MSN would have us believe the Aryan criminals and terrorists are hiding in every doorway and are, causing damage and everything else. It's like, no, I don't think so. They're out there, but they're very rare. I have a joke that and I'll let Margaret answer. I apologize. I always like to say that in any meeting with 3 KKK or Nazis, 2 of them will be feds.
I can't say it better than that. But I will add a sober counterpoint, which is, if we go to the Charlie Kirk assassination and you see an evolution, we're beginning to understand. We're digging into PatCon here, and Eric, so well said by you, how this goes all the way back to the CSA. And we might even point further back to 1983 and Gordon Call and the whole, the beginnings of this. But
and before that, COINTELPRO.
There you go.
Handed off. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. And I don't know the exact points.
Here in this path from PatCon forward, you see this sub rosa targeting of political conservatives. And, just a couple of weeks ago, when the Senate Judiciary Committee was grilling Kash Patel, and Senator Grassley came out and with an expose of this Arctic frost program, right, which has now been exposed to have targeted 92 Republican-linked organizations and individuals, including Charlie Kirk's group. Sure. So you see, to answer here, the PatCon begins and stays a secret, and as Jesse begins to uncover more and more, we talked earlier about this sensitive informant program and how he was shocked to find that the FBI is spying on, media
Everybody.
and others. And now,
Terry Nichols, I think they had an informant on his team, or McVeigh, one of the teams they had an informant
yes, inside legal teams. And what happens is that the violent acts and the violence of the extreme fringe of political conservatives becomes amplified by all of this. And this is to Eric's point about, if there are 3 of them, 2 of them are feds, because if you're infiltrating them and demonizing them, that's where I go to the Charlie Kirk situation. There is a very clear public understanding. And let's not forget, we just had an Attorney General, Merrick Garland, who stepped into his job and announced to the world that the gravest threat facing America today is white nationalism.
Welcome back to 1995.
And so it was a powerful, the messaging, the narrative of how we're all white supremacists, or the political conservatives are all white supremacists. That is a powerful platform, and undoubtedly has exaggerated the actual threat of Aryan nations and others.
Well, if you think about it, just look at the timeline here and look at the focus, right? During Clinton, because it did ease up a little bit during Bush. So during Clinton, the focus was on Bubbas, if you will, rednecks. I'm serious. I'm just throwing it out there. That was a thought. People that Bill would be very familiar with, being from Arkansas, which is a hub of a lot of this. That the real terrorists during Clinton were the Timothy McVeighs, white supremacists, blah 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 blah, hardcore right. Then W comes in, and it shifted to the Middle East. Then he woes out, and it goes right back under Obama. And keep in mind, the word patriot was used by, I think it was Laura Lerner. I can't remember her name, the IRS director. I want to say Laura Lerner. If I've got the wrong name, I'm sorry, but it's something like that. And one of the things that they were looking for aggressively auditing and shutting down nonprofits was the word patriot itself. They were targeting that. And then this continued. Trump never really got any footing, in my opinion. So it's not like much changed. He was so under fire with his own people and confused and really out of his depth first round. And
being targeted as Hitler.
Well, no, I know, but that's what I'm saying. So he never really it didn't really have a shift there.
Yeah.
And then it went to Biden, and what we got Merrick Garland again. So, right there in the mix is the Attorney General. So I think that if you look at the timelines, you could totally see that this message has been peddled for a while. And I plan to keep going on that, and we'll keep going on that. We have so many things coming up. I'm very sure you'll all be seeing a little bit more of Margaret in the future, if she's willing, of course. I can't speak for her, but I think that
love to. Anytime.
We may have to do another Q&A, because I think we've set up a lot of questions for the future. Like I saw people asking about Poindexter. We'll save that for next time, because that is a long, twisted, torrid tale of too many legs. That's my alliteration of the day. But everybody, thank you so much for joining. Please share this around. Consider subscribing. Every Thursday now for weeks, you will be learning more about Oklahoma City. I am completely obsessed with this story. So if you are interested, please keep watching. And thank you,
Eric, and thanks to your wonderful audience. Great to be with you.